Hello, and welcome to another London Ballet Circle in Conversation. My name is Susan, and I'm the chair of London Ballet Circle. If this is your first time joining us, we're absolutely delighted that you're here and hope you enjoy as much as we enjoy having you. This evening's guest is American Ballet Theatre principal Chloe Misseldine. Chloe's very quick rise through the ranks to her promotion last July has been well deserved. Those of us who were lucky enough to be in London last summer will have seen her guesting with Georgian State Ballet, and earlier this month at the Ballet Icons Gala in London. Both performances were absolutely lovely, and the critics had nothing but praise for her. And leading the conversation tonight is writer, critic, and dancer Deborah Weiss. Thank you both so much for being here with us tonight. We're delighted to have you and welcome. Chloe is happy to take questions from you. If you would like to ask her a question, please type it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen and give your first name. And that's terrific. And so from now, I will say goodbye. And here is Chloe and Deborah for tonight's In Conversation.
Hello and welcome, Chloe. It's a real privilege to have you here, even though I think you're in New York, actually. So is that right? Yeah, it feels like you're here. You're on the Zoom, so that's wonderful. And I want to ask you, obviously, about individual performances, but let's go back right to the beginning. When you first started, I understand that your mum was in American Ballet Theatre, and she was also a teacher in Orlando, where you grew up. Is that correct?
Yes. So I'm originally from Orlando, Florida, and I grew up there and trained there my whole youth and my childhood until I moved to New York to join ABT Studio Company. But yes, my mom was also previously a soloist with American Ballet Theatre, and she worked at Orlando Ballet with the company, with the school. So I was very fortunate to be a part of that, and growing up, and my training was there.
So did you actually see her in performance, or were you too young really to, I mean, I don't know whether she stopped when she had you, or whether she continued to perform. Tell me about that.
Yes. So actually, when my mom was pregnant with me, she actually left ABT. That's when she retired from American Ballet Theatre. So I never got to actually see her perform live. Oh, sorry. Hope you don't hear the New York sirens. They're out and about. So I apologize for that. But no, I never got to see her perform live, but I was very fortunate to have a lot of old tapes of hers that I'm able to watch, even just small snippets of her dancing, which was so beautiful. But I was never able to watch her perform, unfortunately.
So would you say that she was the driving force in terms of you deciding to take it up as a profession? Or did she really say, well, I think you should do this and a little bit of sport and a little bit of that and whatever, and then you found your own way? Or do you feel there was a lot of influence there, because she carried on by teaching, didn't she?
Yes.
I mean, she is a teacher now. So tell me how you sort of came to the conclusion that you wanted to pursue it.
So definitely, if she wasn't a ballet dancer or she didn't influence me, I would have probably never started ballet. But growing up, I did, I used to wear her pointe shoes around my house. She was always coaching, teaching. So I was surrounded by ballet when I was little. So that definitely was the driving force for me to start ballet and start taking classes. When I was little, I did do, other sports like swimming or outdoor activities. But I think she saw the potential in me when I was little. So she pushed me, gently. When you're young, it's a bit difficult to, just find your ways or what you enjoy. But she found that I had potential, and she pushed me when I was little. And, you know, as I got older, I started enjoying it more, loved being in the studio, performing. And when I was around 14, 15 years old, that's when I really found my passion for ballet. And that's when she started coaching me more, you know, as I got more mature, and she saw that I was trying and working. She started coaching me outside after, you know, ballet classes or rehearsals. So yeah, I really think she was the driving force for me to find my passion for ballet. And, you know, we have such a great relationship. I know it can be a little bit difficult, you know, with mother-daughter relations, like in the same career, but she's always been just so patient with me, and such a big inspiration. And I'm so thankful and grateful to have her be by my side and supporting me ever since I was little.
Yeah, I mean, it must be amazing actually, because she's literally been in your shoes, although you were obviously in her shoes when you were wearing her, weren't you?
Yes, exactly. I don't necessarily fit in them anymore because she has really tiny feet, but when I was little, I used to wear them. I had a specific pair that I would always wear. They were her Cinderella shoes that were, they weren't bedazzled, but they had designs on them, you know, as the glass slipper. So they were a little bit shinier and prettier. So I used to wear those all the time around the house. They were huge, but I would strap them around my feet. And then now I can barely fit my knuckles in her shoes because they're so small, because I'm so much taller than her.
Oh, but in terms of when you do performances, it must be a wonderful thing to come off stage and know that you can go through the tiny details of things that went wrong, things that went right, things that you know felt especially good, and for her to be able to empathize with you and discuss it on a sort of exactly the same level, because she's been
Mhm.
there and done that.
She knows exactly what I'm thinking. So yes, we always analyze, we always go through even like rehearsals that we work together, you know, on our days off or when I'm preparing for a big ballet, you know, and I have my normal scheduled rehearsals during the week, which I really put all my energy and effort into. But then also it's nice to, you know, on the weekends just to talk about things or, you know, analyze little parts of, you know, this section from this ballet. But definitely after performances, it's always nice to have some extra feedback, you know, about like, oh, I noticed in this moment you can do something differently, or, you know, more technical corrections that are like your foot was sickled or your knees need to be straightened here or there, or your port-de-bras. So it's really great to have that. And also every time I have like rehearsal on stage, you know, like a tech or a general rehearsal, I always like to film my rehearsals so I can analyze them. And sometimes I'll send them to her and ask for her feedback or her what she thinks. So it's really great to have that extra push.
So I have to say, I'm sure your feet are never sickled. I've certainly never seen a sickle foot.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Are you, so maybe this is not the right expression, but do you ever feel slightly nervous or afraid of what your mum might say? If you have felt somewhat concerned about maybe a particular phrase in a performance, and you ask her afterwards, so did you notice me doing this? Do you sometimes ask her questions with trepidation because you think, oh my goodness, she actually saw that and I hope nobody else saw it, and things like that?
Yes, I do have moments like that for sure. You know, because she knows me so well, because we've worked together for so many years, she just knows every little detail about, you know, how my body works, you know, what looks best on me. So of course, there's always a bit of like nervousness, like, you know, what she thinks, or like how she's gonna react to, you know, a certain performance. But it's always positive feedback. And, you know, she knows me, I know myself. So I'll tell her like, oh, I know this section was not great, or like, you know, this performance was not good. So we're on that level where we can talk about things like that, and it's really great to be able to express how you feel, and, you know, whether you did well or you did bad, and so she can agree or disagree or just have that conversation.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit, because you you were in the Youth America Grand Prix when you were pretty young, I think,
Yes.
15 or 16.
I did the year I went to the final round in New York, I think I was 15, but I think my first year was when I was 14. But I just did the, the regional, like back at home, first the regional round. But when I was 15, I did the final round in New York.
And how did you feel about that? Because competitions have become part of the dance world now. Years and years ago, it wasn't really like that. I think there was one major one in Varna, and
Yes, the international
yes,
ones.
yeah. But now it's almost as if it's the normal thing to go and participate, and it does open your eyes to the different kinds of training that is out there. And I mean, tell me how you felt. I mean, particularly at 14, where you're not quite there yet in terms of having formed your sort of adult self, and going to see what other people could do. I mean, that must have been such an eye-opener.
Yes, definitely, because competitions were the first time I really performed on stage, on my own in a solo and contemporary. I've like never danced contemporary like ever in my life. Only in, class in the classroom, we would have contemporary class or some other modern classes. So overall, the competition was really amazing because I got to experience other aspects of dance, rehearsing a different way, on my own, having just a coach and me be in the studio practicing over and over again. So just the whole experience was, I think, matured me a little bit. I wasn't just, taking ballet class and having point class and then, with a group of people. It was more of an individual thing. And when I went to New York to compete, I got to meet like the most amazing dancers from all over the world, from different schools that I idolized. I got to meet, directors from all the schools and get to speak with them and have class with them. So the whole experience, of course, this is what everybody says, but winning is not the prize. But I do feel the whole experience just helps you grow, especially as a young dancer. Being nervous, going on stage, especially in New York, the David Koch Theater is so large and you're on your own. Like I've never danced on a stage that big by myself. So definitely there was a lot of nervousness, stress. But overall, the feeling was just so amazing, especially at such a young age to experience that. And all the people I met, all the dancers in my year, some of them I'm still very close with, or some that I competed with from my school. So I just love the experience, and I think it really helps young dancers grow, traveling to other cities to perform, meeting different directors, schools, and experiencing all of that. So I always thought it was really great for me as a young dancer.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think it's fantastic. It's also a little bit of a window on that kind of one shot. You've got, this is your moment. You've got to
Yes.
get it right. You've got to get that pirouette in at the end, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's a good stepping stone if you're intending to become a professional dancer. So when do you think you actually thought, this is the life for me? When was the turning point?
I don't think there was ever really like a switch where I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I think it was just kind of like a slow burning feeling. When I was in Orlando Ballet, the years that I was in the school and part-time, I was like a trainee, which is before the second company. They really provided us opportunities to perform, to, do partnering classes or, do pas de deux on stage and contemporary character classes. So I was really engulfed in all that repertoire and all the dancing. So it just kind of grew on me. And the more I performed on stage, the more I just loved it because I absolutely adore being on stage. I love the rehearsal process and, in the studio, really going through the details and coaching, but the feeling of being on stage, it's very indescribable. I just love the audience, the adrenaline you get, like becoming something or someone else that you aren't. So just the whole aura of that is thrilling. So I think when I started performing more on stage, that's when I really grew a passion for ballet.
So after the Youth America Grand Prix, I believe you were invited to the Prix de Lausanne.
Yes.
And from there, I mean, it's a different experience from Youth America Grand Prix, but I think it's equally interesting in terms of the fact that it's actually a much smaller group with much more intense rehearsal and coaching, which is, again, a different experience. So tell me a little bit about that time when you knew you were going, didn't you? Because you'd done so well in America that you got invited, because normally you would have to audition, I believe.
Yes. So typically for the Prix de Lausanne competition in Lausanne, Switzerland, you have to send in like a video audition. I think it includes like variation, contemporary, maybe some class. But through Youth American Grand Prix, they invited me to come compete automatically, like without having to audition. So it was a guaranteed entry to compete at the Prix de Lausanne. So absolutely, I was like, yes, we will be doing this. And the Prix de Lausanne, again, was just another layer to my experience and growth as a dancer, because first of all, this is in another country, a completely different place that I'm not used to. It was my first time in Europe. And it's a much more intimate competition. There are less dancers. There's actually, the variations were picked specifically for each group. So I was in the junior category, the younger group. So our variations were a little bit shorter, not so technically challenging. So we had to pick one to perform, and then we had to pick a contemporary to perform as well. But again, this competition, it was another very unique experience, because when you enter the building for the competition, for the classes, for the coaching, your own personal coaches are not allowed to help you, coach you on the side, or even, on the side stage or anywhere in the building, because the unique part of the competition was focused solely on just the dancers and the individuals, to see how they work on their own, with the coaches while performing, doing the classes, interacting with everybody. So they asked us not to have any like our coaches and parents were allowed to be in the studios and watching and backstage and in the general area, but they weren't allowed to coach or give corrections or notes, which was very unique, because you had to do everything on your own. You had to, work with the coaches by yourself. It's a different atmosphere, because maybe the coach you're working with, you've never met, you've never spoken to. So it's a new environment. But I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Lausanne, because it was absolutely amazing.
I guess, in a sense, they're testing you to see how you respond in an unfamiliar situation with a new coach. And that's, it's a useful process to have to.
Very, very. Because when you become a professional dancer, I mean, of course you have coaches and everything, but you're on your own. So when you perform, you're on your own. When you take class, so they were preparing us just what it's like to be in company life, but thoroughly like how you would be on your own.
So from the Prix de Lausanne, was it there that you were offered a contract with ABT Studio Company, or was it later?
So, well, from the competition, I was always very much involved with ABT. I think I did like 4 or 5 years of summer program leading, like prior to the competition. So I was involved with ABT. I was familiar with the studios, with the teachers, dancers, coaches, in like a certain extent, because summer program is not necessarily the same as, year round. But I was, involved with ABT. And representing ABT at the time was Cynthia Harvey. She was the director of the JKO school at the time. She was representing ABT in the studio company. And after the competition, she offered me a contract on behalf of Miss Katie Leiden, who was the director of studio company at the time. She offered me a contract for the following season to join ABT, which I was over the moon about because I've always wanted to move to New York and be a part of ABT, growing up surrounded by it on YouTube and social media. It was a dream come true. But after the competition concluded, about 2 weeks after, I got a call from Miss Katie Leiden, who is the director, and she said that she had a spot available for me to join if I would like, and that would happen in like 2 weeks. So 2 weeks after the competition, I got a call to join ABT in 2 weeks. So I said yes, and I moved to New York right away. I moved into the house that was provided for the studio company dancers. I packed up and moved to New York, and it was so thrilling and so exciting for a young 16-year-old who's never lived by herself anywhere. I never did dormitory. I never did, sleepaway camp. So this was my first time being on my own.
Oh my goodness me. That sounds very daunting, but
it definitely was.
Yeah, but exciting.
It was so exciting. I remember the time. It was so much fun. And I said yes. I went ahead with it without looking back, and it was the best decision.
So with these junior companies, I think it's pretty much the same everywhere. Not that they existed when I was dancing, but now that they do, more and more of the big companies are providing junior companies. And it's a great experience for the dancers to get up on stage and maybe do some things that they wouldn't necessarily do if they went straight from school into the main company. They might be stuck in the back row of the corps for a very long time. But in the junior company, you get to do all sorts of more soloist type stuff. Tell me about that.
Yes, so of course my only experience is with ABT Studio Company. I'm not really sure exactly how it is with other second companies, but Studio Company was such a great stepping stone before joining the main company, because in my time in the ABT Studio Company, I got to dance a wide variety of repertoire that was Balanchine, new works, classical works, like so many things. And I got really comfortable doing technique or pas de deux on stage and, working with a group of dancers. My year, there was only 12 of us. So it is still a very small group, but we did everything. We were rotating ballets. We were in and out, different casts, performing, rehearsing all the time. But I do think it was a vital step before joining the main company, because not only did I get familiar with ABT, the dancers, the building, everything, I was able to dance and experience more opportunities on stage before heading to the main company, because normally when you join the main company, you don't dance very much. You're fresh to the company. They want to still familiarize themselves with you. So maybe you're not even performing, you're just still observing new ballets or the classical ballets. You might be second cast or not perform at all, just depending on what they're doing at the time. But it was a very drastic change from studio company to main company, because I was dancing so much. And then all of a sudden I'm in the main company, which I was very grateful to have joined, but I wasn't doing nearly as much as what I was doing in Stuco.
But it didn't actually take that long for you to get a big break. But more of that in a minute. Just in between that time of the studio company and the main company, we had the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that affect you? And were you feeling sort of quite desperate? I'm sure you were one of these dancers that were in your room hanging on to the
class. I know, on the
rail or whatever.
Anything. Well, for me, the pandemic definitely was so difficult for all of the dancers of ABT, especially the ones that were stuck in New York. I was very fortunate to be able to go home. I went back to Florida, where I have my family, we have a house, more space. But I did have a lot of friends that were stuck in New York for many months, that were confined to their 400 square foot, 300 square foot apartment, which can be very brutal, you know, especially in a time like that when you're not allowed to leave or see people or take class. So I was very fortunate to be able to go home and be surrounded by friends and family, or mostly family, and have the luxury, the space to be able to move, whether that's in my living room or in the kitchen. But it was hard the beginning of the pandemic. We were taking Zoom classes every day. We had one of our directors of repertoire, his name is Carlos Lopez. He started doing Zoom classes, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like for 1 or 2 dancers. And then eventually more dancers joined. And, you know, towards the end of it, there was like 40, 50 people taking class in their apartments on Zoom. Like I saw everybody's like little pictures. And it was so great to, you know, be back together, you know, in theory, taking class and doing things together. We would even have like joint strength classes, or even sometimes ABT offered varieties of dance classes, whether that's modern, contemporary, or even like other types of lyrical dance. So it was a hard time, but it was a great time at the same time because we were together being able to do this. But I was in Florida, so things did gradually open up relatively soon for us. And I was really lucky because my school, Orlando Ballet School, their company started performing and rehearsing pretty early on in the pandemic. So I was able to go back to Orlando and perform quite a bit with the main company under Robert Hill's direction. He used to be the director of Orlando Ballet. He was a principal with ABT. So I've known him my whole life, but he offered me to come perform, and I was over the moon because I was finally able to be back in the studio rehearsing and dancing.
Absolutely. So now we're going to move to when you went back to New York and were rehearsing with American Ballet Theatre, the main company. So, I mean, if I'm right, you've only really been professional for about 2 years when you were promoted to soloist, I think.
Yes,
Or
I actually,
the first year, maybe.
yeah, I was only in the main company for 1 year, right after the pandemic, before I was promoted.
Amazing. And then it must have been only another year and a half before your promotion to principal.
I was in the court of ballet for 1 year, and then 2 years as a soloist.
Okay.
2 more years.
Okay. So let me ask you what the first thing that you did was as a soloist role, what out of the corps de ballet, what was your first steps on the stage as a soloist of American Ballet Theatre?
Sorry, just to reiterate the question, you mean as actually as a soloist, or my first soloist role?
Your first soloist role. Sorry,
Well,
I didn't.
okay, no, it's okay. So we came back from the pandemic. We were so excited to be back in the studio. We were putting together multiple ballets, multiple repertoire pieces, and Giselle, like full-length Giselle, for our fall season, which was at the Koch Theater in October. So I was doing one ballet, which I danced during the pandemic. During the pandemic, we did these like bubble projects / we did a truck tour. We traveled across the States in this big bus, and we performed all these performances, these ballets outside. So I was able to dance one of the ballets I did then in the new season. But there was one ballet that I was understudying. It was Alexei Ratmansky's ballet. It was called Bernstein in a Bubble, which he created in the pandemic, and he brought it back for the fall season. But I was just understudying it. I was the second cast for one of the principal ladies, and the first cast was like just a cast full of principals, soloists, and a few corps de ballet. I wouldn't want to say intimidating, but when you first join the company, it is intimidating because they're just these well-established dancers. And I was the second cast learning. But halfway through the rehearsal process, my first cast got injured, and the only option was to put me in it because I was the only one learning it. So I went in, I rehearsed it for a few weeks. I was so nervous. I was so scared because this was my first time performing like a major ballet on this big theater with all these amazing dancers. So I was very scared. I was very nervous, but super excited because it was such a fun ballet. So yeah, that was my very first major role with the company, coming back after the pandemic. And of course, working with Alexei was just amazing, just the short periods of time that I got to be with him in the studio, because he's very patient, but he's so demanding and is trying to bring out the best in you. And I just loved every minute of it. So
fabulous. So, and what about more solos? I noticed that you've done Myrta in Giselle.
yes.
That's a pretty taxing role.
Mhm.
And what other things suddenly came your way? Because of course, once they see you can do a solo or a solo role and get through it, then other things start coming your way. So what other roles did you add to your repertoire?
So that year, my first year, I also started learning one of the flower girls in Donkyu, in ABT's production of Donkyu, which is a soloist role, but she is featured throughout the whole ballet, first, second, and third act. And in the third act, she has there's two flower girls. I was one of them. And in the third act, she has this really difficult variation in the middle of the third act parada. So that was my first major classical full-length soloist role. I got to work with Susan Jones on it very thoroughly, and it was such a great experience. And it was just so much fun being on stage, because Donkey was such a fun ballet, and there's so much character, so much acting, so much dancing. So that was one of the best times I've had on stage. But that was my first classical role, and I was also able to dance the pas de trois in Swan Lake during our ABT Met season. So those were two major classical roles that I got to dance as well. And then the following year, I danced Myrta on tour and at the Met, which was also equally nerve-wracking because all those penchés and dark lights in the second act and jumping and stamina. But it was great.
Let me ask you a little bit about stamina, because we haven't got to Swan Lake yet, but obviously that's a big thing for that. But in other roles, I mean, Myrta is very taxing in terms of cardio work, but it's also very tough on the legs, and because you are doing so much jumping. How do you deal with that? How have you honed yourself in order to know that you've got the confidence to get through it in terms of stamina? And how do you sort of, when you're rehearsing it, work out where you're going to try and save a little bit of energy so that you've got enough to get through to the end?
So it definitely takes a few weeks, or probably actually a few months of preparation for a role like this. So I was able to dance Myrta on tour with ABT in the States before I did it at the Met in New York. So that was kind of like my trial run. Of course, I wanted to do my best, but it was my first time on stage, so I got to feel it out. But I did have a lot of rehearsal leading up to it, every day. My main coach was Irina Kopakova, ballet legend. She's amazing working in the studio, her energy. She really coached me on Myrta, so I worked very closely with her. But every day we would drill. We started out slow, of course, learning the choreography and doing section by section, and then eventually doing the full section, and then maybe taking a short break, then doing all the jumping sections. And then towards leading up to the performance, I would just run it. So I would do the first chunk, which was about 5-6 minutes long, a few minutes long. I would rest maybe like 1 minute, because I only had 1 or 2 minutes on stage. So I would rest, we'd put a timer on, and then I would do the next sections and, do it all the way till the end. But stamina is one of the main stresses I find for myself, for a performance. Like, I know myself and I know I'll get through it. It's just, I know the pain that's coming. So I just have to mentally prepare for that. And Myrta was a good stepping stone for that, because the whole time she's jumping and, she's on stage. And then after her whole section, she gets like 10 minutes in the wings to, breathe, like get her legs back on. And then for the whole second act, the paradas, she has to stay on stage. watching Giselle and Albrecht. So, but I really enjoyed dancing Myrta, and it was very thrilling and exhilarating being able to jump across the stage.
Yes, I'm sure. Wonderful. Now I'm going to ask you about Odette Odile, because you've really shot up in that, you know, from going from doing solos, and then suddenly you're doing Odette Odile, and within months you're guesting doing Odette Odile. I mean, that's extraordinary. So tell me about that little journey.
So after my summer season at the Met, which I did Swan Lake, in the summer, I actually was told, Susan Jaffe did tell me I would be dancing Swan Lake the following year. So she told me in August, and my performance wasn't until February at the Kennedy Center in DC. But so I started off very slowly. You know, of course, I had a full fall season and Nutcracker season leading up to my performance. So we would rehearse periodically through that time, primarily focusing on my performances that were coming up. But not until January, about 2 months before my Swan Lake premiere, that we really dove deep into it, you know, rehearsing every day, whether that's pas de deux and variations or one or the other. You know, we were in the studio together every day, drilling the ballet, because, you know, Swan Lake is a beast of a ballet, and it's my first one. You know, I've never danced a full length at that time, so I didn't know what to expect, you know, how to you know, approach the second act, then have to do the third act, then fourth act. And then, you know, minor things like, do I want to wear the same pair of shoes? Do I want to break in new shoes? Like, what do I want to do? So it was definitely an interesting process for me, just approaching those different questions, those different parts of the ballet. But Susan was really amazing the whole process. She really went straight into detail, every step of what I should do, how I should look at him in this moment, how to do the fourth act, which is just so powerful. So we really spent a lot of hours in the studio, and my partner was very patient with me because I always wanted to do second act. We were always rehearsing second act, and he was just very great to, you know, let me do whatever I wanted to do for whatever we did those days. But I had such an amazing experience. And, you know, when I finally got out on stage, I was just so ready and so excited. I just wanted to go out there and be in the lake. So
I believe you have a little bit of a point shoe story to tell.
Yes, I do.
Reveal all.
So for my Swan Lake, I wear block point shoes. They're the Alpha maker of block. I think they've discontinued the stock shoes, but I order custom, so I'm able to get my shoes now. But at the time of last year, I was getting batches of shoes, and I had one certain batch that I felt great. You know, I thought they were going to be consistent, you know, the next one's coming. So I had a batch that were great. You know, they were fit me perfectly, molded to my foot well. And I had like one or two pairs left, one pair left, I think. So then I went to shoes. I was like, can I get some more shoes? And she gave me many more. And I realized like these shoes are just like so hard. Like I can't wear them. There's too much glue around the box. I didn't feel comfortable standing on point, no matter how much I like, you know, bang them with a hammer or cut the shank. So I was stressing. I had no shoes, and more of my shoes weren't coming. So I was like panicking. I didn't know what to do. I was trying other people's shoes. I was trying to fix my own shoes to make them work. But I was very lucky that I saved one pair. So about 3 weeks before the show, I put those shoes aside, sacred. I like, even traveling to DC, I always kept them like next to me because I didn't want anything to happen to them. I kept them in a plastic bag, so no water or drink or food spilled on them. But leading up to the show, I only had the shoes that were kind of like soft already that I've been wearing. So I literally just wore 2 pairs of the same shoes, like it was probably like 2 weeks leading up to the performance. So all my rehearsals, all my run throughs, I'm wearing the same pair, just gluing them over and over and over again. And then I had, you know, of course, tech rehearsals on stage prior to my performance. So I would just wear these like dead shoes that were like peeling on the tip. And our ABT Swan Lake floor is like it's painted, I believe. It's like a blue green painted floor to look like the lake / ballroom for third act. And it's very sticky. So anytime you turn, or like if you have any resistance on the shoe, it kind of slowly rips away your satin on your shoes. So after my tech rehearsal, my shoe was like completely destroyed for second act, and it's like falling off, like the tip was like falling off. But I still had a third act rehearsal the day before my show. So I just, grit my teeth, I put them on, and I just wore the same pair for the tech rehearsal, or the stage rehearsal. They're like falling off. My shoes are like completely gone by this point. And so I was like praying the day of my show that these new shoes, the one pair I had, were like good and nothing was wrong with them. And also I wasn't sure what to expect because I haven't worn new shoes in like weeks. So I didn't know how my foot was going to react to like the cramping. So when I cut them and I sewed them, I was so careful about how I broke them in to make sure that they were good. And my only choice was to wear them for the whole ballet. So I ended up wearing them for second, third, and fourth act. And luckily they worked out and I still have them. I kept them sacred just as little safekeeping. I wrote down Kennedy Center, Swan Lake, like 2024 on them on the back, but I still have them and they lasted me the whole ballet. So I make sure now I don't have that problem leading performances.
I mean, it's extraordinary, really, when you think you had to go through that, not only having to prepare yourself for a major role,
Right.
but to have the shoe thing going on in the background and
stressful.
wondering how you're going to get through it. But
there were many tears shed in the dressing room. But it's okay. It was just stress tears, but it ended up being okay. And I was happy that at least that was the least of my concerns, was just shoes, nothing else.
So after you'd done that performance, the next time you did it was that in New York, or did you? Right. And had they got you your shoes by
yes, I got my shoes by then, so it was okay. I was able to use as many as I liked for each act, any rehearsal. I broke in a pair from my third act, I broke in a pair from my second, and then I had 2 pairs for the show. So I changed my shoes after second act, after the white act.
And was it in New York? It was in New York that you found out that you'd been promoted to principal, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. On stage after my Swan Lake. So she promoted me on stage literally after I bowed. She came out on stage and made an announcement, and it was crazy. It was the last thing I expected, but it was just a whirlwind of emotions. The audience was there. The whole company was on stage. Well, the people that were dancing, the company was on stage. So it was such a great feeling to have everybody surrounded and so enthusiastic. So I treasure that moment.
And it was a genuine shock for you, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Because ABT is not known for on stage promotion. So the last thing I expected was that.
And so tell me how the State Ballet of Georgia came to invite you. I mean, absolutely wonderful, particularly for us in London, to be able to see you. But that's another big step, going and doing a major role pretty soon after, you've only just started doing it, with a company that you're not familiar with. So you haven't got all your mates around you saying, "Come on, Chloe, get those photos in." What was that like, and how did it come about that they invited you? I mean, had someone seen your New York shows or something like that?
So I actually found out Nina messaged Susan Jaffe actually for my information and if I were available, for these dates, because she knew all the dates for the season leading up. So she actually reached out to Susan about wanting me to perform after my DC performance. So this was actually before New York. This was during I believe April, May, probably around May when she messaged her. I remember the day so clearly. I just finished a Onegin rehearsal and she came up to me. She's like, I have big news. So she asked me how I would feel, doing that, as a soul, because at the time I was a soloist, going to London, performing with a company that I'm unfamiliar with. And I said, absolutely, I would love to go there. I would love to perform at the Coliseum, work with Nina. So I actually found out before my Met season. So luckily, leading up to the performance, knowing I had another show in New York to prepare myself, to do Swan Lake one more time before going somewhere else to do it was a bit comforting. So I knew that I could do it. But the whole experience with State Ballet Georgia was amazing. The whole company is so hardworking, so genuine, so kind and welcoming. I felt such great energy from all the dancers. My partner, who I danced with, he's not a dancer with State Ballet of Georgia, but he dances elsewhere, but he was amazing. I loved dancing with him. He was so strong, so seasoned. He was very great to work with, and getting to work with Nina was just a highlight. She is so enthusiastic and so exciting, so hard, like pushing me. I wish I had more time to work with her because I only had like 2 days before the show, and then I performed and then left. I did 2 performances and then I had to go back to New York for rehearsal because we started our fall season.
So, I mean, that's another thing I'm interested to hear you talk about, is the fact that you're invited to go to this and do these performances, but you're not really dancing with a partner that you're used to working with, and you've got a couple of days rehearsal and then you're on. So, so how does that feel? I mean, you've just done Ballet Icons as well, and I think you were with Reese, weren't you? Reese Clark.
Yes. Yes.
Now, apparently he's a wonderful partner. I'm sure he is. But that must be a strange thing, because you're on stage. You have to have that kind of chemistry, and it has to be almost instantly formed, because you don't have any great lead up. So tell me what it's like dancing with different partners like that.
So for Swan Lake, this was my first time dancing with somebody that, well, actually, I've done like other galas where I've never met the partner before. So, and you have to have that instant, relationship, to dance together. For Swan Lake, I'm always very comfortable, like working. When I met my partner, his name is Misha. He was amazing. When I met him, I just felt like I was very comfortable with him. He was so kind, so attentive to me, like what I wanted or what version I wanted to do. It was a bit difficult because some parts of the ballet, like in the opening of the second act and then the fourth act, is completely different than what our version is. So, the first day I arrived, I had to learn. We worked probably like 4 hours, rehearsing together on the pas de deux, on the other small sections that I didn't know the choreography. Of course, I did my own homework, but it was very hard to, learn without a full corps de ballet and, partner and somebody that knows it. So the first day it was just putting together, feeling out how we danced together, but it was very seamless. Like we worked out very well, and I didn't have any troubles. Luckily, Swan Lake, I've done a few times, so I was comfortable with what version I wanted to do. So I suggested we do this and this instead of this, and he was like, we can do whatever you like. So that was very helpful that he was accommodating me in every way. And for example, like when I danced with Reese, I never danced Giselle before. This was my first time dancing Giselle. So I was more nervous about that rather than the partnering, because I knew he was an amazing partner. And we've actually danced together before. A couple years ago for another performance, we danced in Santiago, Chile for a gala in the summer, I think 2 years ago. So I already knew Reese, like we were friends and we've danced together before. So it was easy to get together and perform. But
so what about, because I think you dance with Aaron Bell quite a lot, don't you?
yes.
I mean, is there a kind of, this is going to be my partner, we are going to be, I'm not saying Fontaine and Nureyev or whatever, but that's the way you'd like to see it going so that you have this unbelievable rapport that you can build on as you go into doing different roles. Is that how you see it happening?
So I think so. I think I see that as the trajectory. But like for me, you know, in ABT, I'm the tallest principal lady dance ballerina. So I can only dance with a few of the men in the company. There's like three or maybe like around 2 or 3 male dancers that I can, you know, comfortably dance with. So for other dancers who are a little bit shorter, it's a bit easier to partner, like put together dancers. So I don't have that luxury of getting to dance with everybody. But as of now, Arn is primarily my partner for every ballet. I think I danced with him the whole Met season. All of our ballets this summer I'll be with him. But we have a great partnership. He's an amazing partner, amazing dancer, very attentive to me. Like I said, when we were doing Swan Lake, he was like, "What do you want to do today? We can do whatever you like," you know. So even wanting to do White Swan every day, he was content with doing that. So I love dancing with him. He's an amazing dancer partner. So and I think we connect very well. So yeah, I'll be dancing with him the whole summer.
That's great. So I also wanted to ask you about dancing Tatiana in Onegin, because that is it's an amazing ballet, but it's an amazing role. So tell me about how you prepared for that and how it feels.
Tatiana was such an like out of body experience for sure. When I was told I was doing Tatiana, like Susan told me, we were on tour. We were in China, I believe. You know, that was the November leading. This was not this past November, the November before. But I remember she was telling me after like a stage rehearsal, it was just the two of us. She was coaching me on Myrta, and you know, the company was filing in for a full stage rehearsal for Act One. And she told me, and I like kind of, I wouldn't say screamed, but I like was like, oh, like I out loud, and a lot of the dancers was like, is she okay? And it was such a fond memory because she was telling me, and I was so surprised because, you know, Tatiana is such a mature role, especially if I was only, when she told me I was only 21. I was soon to be 22, but I was still, you know, a little baby, you know, doing a role like this. So when she told me, I was just so excited and so surprised. But I love dancing Tatiana, and the whole experience of becoming her and, you know, incorporating her into my life was very, very different and something that I'm not used to. I've never done like a dramatic ballet. It was my first dramatic ballet. It was my first full length at the Met, doing Tatiana, but I treasure every moment I got to work and be her and, you know, discover how to become her, not necessarily be her, but, you know, incorporate myself into her. And I love the experience and the storytelling and every minute of it.
So what do you feel like at the end? Because as you rightly say, I mean, it's a very dramatic ballet, but it's emotionally, it's quite draining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a hard one because
If, you know, it's happening in real, I mean, you actually believe you're that person and you're going through those emotions. So what's the come down like afterwards? You know, how do you sort of come down from that high of all the
I
emotion?
know it was interesting because at the Met I was only supposed to have one show, but I was lucky I was able to gain a second show, so I got to experience it twice, the full length performance. But my Onegin, my partner, his name is Thomas Forster. Yes, I love dancing with him. We really grew a very special relationship, you know, doing this ballet, because I didn't know him very well before doing this ballet. Like we like spoke maybe like in the hallways, or, you know, we never danced together. So getting to know him and, you know, experience this ballet together because it was his debut as well, is very special. And I love dancing with him and just getting to work with him in the studio. But it was interesting because, you know, the story, it's a lot of the stuff I've never experienced, of course, because I'm still quite young. but I do believe that you don't necessarily have to experience it to be able to portray it. You know, you can find different emotions and different aspects of life to bring yourself out. I definitely was on a high for quite a few days after the performance. You know, it's just so emotionally draining that you're literally crying on stage at the end of the ballet. So it, like the whole time we were bowing on stage with the company, you know, our current bow, I wasn't necessarily smiling because I wasn't necessarily like, you know, happy. Of course, I was proud of the performance, but I was still in that sorrow mode. And it took a little bit to, you know, kind of come back down to reality for a little bit. But I hope Onegin comes back soon, because I would love to approach the ballet not differently, but, you know, in another fresh way after a couple of years. So, but
absolutely. And it is the sort of ballet that you can grow in a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So what other major roles have you got coming up that you're allowed to say? I mean, perhaps there are things that you're not allowed to say.
No. All the casting has come out now, so I'm allowed to say it. But I'll be making my Giselle debut, my full-length Giselle debut. We'll be doing it on tour at the end of April, so it's coming up. Nervous. I think I have 3 weeks. 3 weeks, 4 weeks. 4 weeks to go. So I have a month before that. I'll be premiering that on tour in the States, and then I'll make my New York debut in the summer. So I'm preparing Giselle, and then I'm also preparing Theme and Variations, Balanchine's Theme and Variations. Hard one, very scary, very nerve-wracking, very fast. I've never danced anything like it before, but I'll be dancing that in Korea, South Korea, when we go on tour a week after my Giselle debut. So in 5 weeks. So I have my Giselle, and then a week later, in that time, we travel to Korea, and I'll perform Theme and Variations.
That is scary stuff, but wonderful stuff.
Yes, it's very exciting, but challenging.
And both those ballets, I always think the music carries you.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me about your relationship with music, generally.
Yes. Well, okay. I personally love music, any type of music. Right now, I'm on a classical kick a little bit. I love listening to classical music, just putting it when I'm cleaning, when I'm sewing point shoes, when I'm just doing housework, even preparing for class, you know, on the way to the studio. I love listening to different, and if it's not classical, just any types of music. I think I couldn't live life without it. But I do find it helps me personally tremendously when dancing, because I can feel it and I can incorporate it into my dancing, and it just comes together so well. I'm the type of person that doesn't count, and I like to listen to the music. And some ballets you really have to count, you know, for, you know, to make sure you're with everybody and stuff. But I'm really a listener, and I love to listen to the music, and that's when I feel my rhythm. But especially ballets like Giselle and Theme, the music is just so glorious and so beautiful. Like in Giselle, the final act, the second act, just the whole part of it is beautiful. Everything about it is so inspiring. But just when you get to the second act of Giselle, the music is just so, I wouldn't say sad, but it's being able to dance with it is just another feeling like you can't describe. And then of course, when you get to do it on stage and like in costume with your partner, it's just the most wonderful feeling. So
absolutely. It's an absolutely vital component.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Dancer. Yeah. So I'm just trying to think. I wanted to ask you if there were any particular choreographers, either that you desperately want to work with. I mean, it's always a wonderful thing when you have a piece created for you. So is there anyone in particular that you really want to work with, or that you want to work with again? Because you've just mentioned Ratmansky. Yes. And I would imagine he is a choreographer that inspires his dancers a lot, and you want to work with them again. So tell me, who are your top 10 list or whatever, top 5?
Well, I was gonna say for sure Alexei, because amazing choreographer, brilliant, genius. Just his musicality, the way he creates ballets is so interesting, and I would love to, experience that again, especially as I'm older, because I've only danced a handful of his ballets. I wouldn't even say a handful, like only a few. But Ratmansky, I would love to work with him again. And I would love to work with Twyla Tharp. I've never personally worked with her. And she, she's a vital part of ABT. But we'll probably be working with her for our next fall season. So I hope to dance a few of her ballets and get to work closely with her, but she's always been such an inspiration. I went to one of her talks a couple of years ago about a book she wrote, and it was my first time meeting her, and she was just so cool and so interesting. And I was just like, I just want to work with her and be in the studio with her, because I know she's gonna push me and get my groove on. And so I definitely want to work with Twyla Tharp, hopefully in the future, for sure.
And what about some European choreographers like Killian and
Yes, absolutely. Well,
well,
yes, no, I danced a Petite Mort last season, and I loved, it was my first time performing on stage barefoot. I've never danced barefoot, so that was a bit difficult, challenging for me in the beginning. But I would love to work with, dance more of his ballets. And I think it's hard, being in the States. I would love to go to Europe and dance and travel and work with all these choreographers. But, I think hopefully in the future, opportunities like that will arise. But yeah, I would absolutely be open to work with any type of European choreographer, because it just broaden your horizon and your approach to dance.
And I noticed that you've done Chris Wheeldon's Like Water for Chocolate. You did Rosora, was it?
Yes, I did the older sister. I danced her.
That must have been weird because you're so young.
Yes, it was. My Tita was older than me, so it was interesting. But I guess I'm taller, so I adds to the effect.
But that must have been a really interesting experience, because it's classical ballet, obviously, but it's not one of the classics, not yet anyway.
Right.
But to do something that is very classical, but isn't in the Sleeping Beauty, Giselle, Swan Lake mode.
So I actually I really love Like Water for Chocolate. I think it's such a beautiful ballet. The pas de deux, the choreography, the sets, the theatrical moments of the ballet are really beautiful. And it was amazing to be a part of it. Rosara was a bit different for me. I've never danced anything like it. There was some acting, there was some, comedy moments of the ballet, which were really fun. But yes, it was a challenge in the beginning, because this was definitely before my Tatiana journey. So I never really acted on stage, and there was a vital part of her role was, telling a story, because it's all about storytelling, this ballet. There's just so many components of the book to show to the audience without speaking, of course. So it was a bit of a challenge in the beginning. We were able to do it for 2 seasons in a row. So I was able to do it once, and then, come back to it a year later and, try to be a bit more clear with my dancing and my storytelling. So I was happy to have a second shot at that, to reprise the role.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you're playing a character to come back and see if you feel any different, or the different things that come out of it. What else was I going to ask you? I was going to ask you, just for example, you're going to be doing theme and variations. No doubt you have watched that incredible video of
Gelsey, yes, 100 times. It's even brought up in our rehearsals. We're like, Susan or some other coaches will like be like, oh, let's look at this part of what they do. Like we should do it like this. And I'm like, yes, because it's such an amazing video.
It is. It just, everyone talks about it. It is perfection, really.
Of course.
And
Yes.
yeah, yeah. But apart from her, is there any other ballerina that has really transported you and made you sort of feel, I want to be just like that, you know?
Well, I mean, I'm always inspired to, by the dancers of ABT, especially, doing a ballet like Theme and Variations where I'm new to it. We have a ballerina who's done it quite a few times, and she just did a run through last week, and and every time like the last time we did Theme and Variations was my first year in the company. I danced the Demis, one of the Demi themes in her show. So I actually never really got to watch her. So now as the principal watching other casts rehearse it and perform it, it's really inspiring to see how they approach the role in their own way. So, of course I have all the ballerinas who I idolize and love to watch, but I'm always inspired by my own colleagues every day. So getting to witness that and see how they work or how they use the musicality, their footwork, their port de bras, how they're partnered. I always look for those things, within our own dancers. But Gelsey is definitely an inspiring video. She just moves so fast and so quick. It's like she's floating the whole time.
I think that's a very good description, floating.
Yes.
She seems to
It's like
hover.
floating across the stage. I mean, she is like much shorter than me, but I don't want to excuse my height for anything.
So just one sort of last question about dealing with nerves. Because I mean, I don't know how you feel inside before I mean, some people just sort of once they get on stage, it's okay. But what is your routine and build up to getting on stage when you know you've got to survive 3 acts or whatever, and you're trying to get your head into the space, not just the body. Obviously the body has to be prepared, but how you talk yourself around it.
So for me to be able to be comfortable on stage, I have to be prepared. So for me, there's 2 different types of nerves. There's nervous, that you're just, of course, the natural nerves of performing or having to do technique on stage. And then there's the scared nerves. Usually the scared nerves, besides Theme and Variations, because that's, I think, will always be scary. The scared nerves are the ones where I feel unprepared. Like I haven't run it enough. I haven't put enough rehearsal into it. I feel underprepared. But then just the regular nerves, which I get all the time, are the ones where I'm just excited to get out on stage. I just need that extra push just to get out on stage, literally, because once I'm out on stage, I'm comfortable and I feel right at home most of the time. But I just have to rehearse a lot. I have to put in the work, put in the time to feel comfortable out on stage. Like for Swan Lake, I wasn't sure how to expect because of the 2 acts. I didn't know how my stamina was going to put up, but luckily it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was still very hard, but it wasn't as grueling as I was expecting it. But I will be dancing Ashton's Sylvia this summer, which I'm very nervous for because I feel like that is a beast of a ballet. The first act is just, I feel like you tire yourself out completely just from the first act. And then you're on stage the whole second act. And then the third act, the pas de deux variation. I feel like your legs are already so weak and dying at that point. So I'm not sure how I'm going to pace myself for that just yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sure you're going to be fantastic, and it will suit you a great deal, I think. So I think it is something to look forward to. So if it's all right with Susan, I hope it's all right with Susan, if you're out there, I'm going to go on to ask some questions that have come in on the chat. Fiona has asked, talking about competitions, as a young professional, you represented ABT at the Eric Brun competition 2 years ago in March 2023. Can you explain how you choose your repertoire for that competition and what the competition experience was like? Maybe it was different or not to competitions when you're a student. So that's from Fiona.
Well, the Eric Brun I enjoyed the whole process of Eric Brun. So the repertoire, our artistic team chose it. So I danced Grand Pas Classique Pas de deux, and then Lauren Levitt, who has previously choreographed for ABT and used to be a principal dancer in New York City Ballet. She created a contemporary pas de deux that we danced. So of course they chose the classical, but I love Grand Pas Classique and I thought it was a great fit for me and my partner. So I was very happy to dance it. And I've danced it before. But the whole experience was something was nothing that I wasn't sure what to expect because there was only 4 couples competing. Us from ABT, a couple from Germany, a couple from Royal Ballet, and then Canada National Ballet as well, where the competition was held. And all the dancers were so engaging, and some of them I actually knew already, so it was wonderful to see them again. And just to pay tribute to Eric Brun was already something that I'm proud of, and to represent ABT. And I'm very happy with my partner who put in so much time and effort into the competition, with me. Or those Mondays, days off, we would be in the studio practicing. And of course, Lauren, just so enthusiastic for us in creating such a fun contemporary. I just loved every minute of it. And I wish I had more time to spend there, after the competition, but we had to go straight to Orange County, California for a tour of Like Water for Chocolate. It was the first time we were premiering the ballet. So we had to, leave Canada very quickly, Toronto, to head to California.
So Susan is asking, going back to guesting and touring, how do you cope with jet lag when you fly in for a gala, perform, and return to New York all in a couple of days? Dancing on different stages, raked or not? Who would you like to guest with? So that's a few different.
There's a lot. Well, traveling can be very difficult. Like, when I just went to dance for Ballet Icons, I flew in the day before the show. It was a red-eye flight, so I barely slept, and I arrived in London like early in the morning. And I had to dance the next day and then go back to New York the following day. So it was a very brief trip. But I'm actually pretty used to it, so it's not too terrible. And of course, the flight to London is only 6 hours going there, 6 or 7 hours. So I feel like I've done worse. But I know how to cope. I get back to the hotel, I always try to relax, sleep as much as I can. And, whenever I arrive, I always have to do some sort of class or rehearsal. So I booked a studio at one of the open ballet studios to do my own rehearsal. So then the next day, I'm not feeling too bad about my body, from the jet lag and the flying and the swelling. But I'm used to it, so it's not too bad, especially with a place that's 5-6 hour flight.
Right. And so what about the different stages then, in terms of, I don't know if you've danced on a raked stage or a badly raked stage, should I say, that really affects how you pirouette, etc. So,
well, the only raked stage that I've danced on was at the Prix de Lausanne. So that was the one time I danced on it. And the classical that I did was one of the shade variations, the slow shade. So there wasn't too much technique, like turning and a lot of jumping or, going up and down the rake. So it wasn't too much of a drastic change. And I had a few days to prepare before competing because they have a studio there that's raked for us to, familiarize ourselves. So that's not ever been an issue. I haven't had to dance on a raked stage yet, but I'm sure it would take me a few days to adjust. But usually the stages that I go to perform on are pretty nice. I've never really experienced a bad stage or a bad Marley or anything. So I've only had positive experiences so far. I hope they stay that way.
Yes, me too. And so if you could guest with another company, who do you think you might like to guest with, or is that the question just too wide?
Well, I have a few answers if a few is okay. I've always idolized, Paris Opera Ballet. I think the dancers are just exquisite there. They're the footwork, the refinement, beauty. I love Paris Opera. I've always wanted. I've never visited Paris, so I've never been. So I've never seen it, but I would love to hopefully one day. And of course, Royal Ballet, which I've been to many times. I love the facility, the repertoire. The dancers are so kind, and so they're all amazing. So Royal Ballet for sure, the two major European companies, I believe. And then also just as out of curiosity, I've always wanted to dance with New York City Ballet, just because I've danced a few Balanchine ballets, but my repertoire is not like vast, like they're used to. So I've only danced a few Balanchine ballets, but I've always been curious about what it's like over there. And since they're not too far from me, and I live like 10 minutes from New York City Ballet anyway. ABT is a little bit more downtown, but I've always wanted to experience that because I find it so fascinating, the different technique style.
Yeah, that's true. It is something that is unique really to that company. But yes, so Jane has asked, this is a really good question. Onegin and Albrecht are not very nice men. Do you ever feel any sense of injustice or even anger when you dance Tatiana or Giselle? Obviously, you haven't done the full length Giselle, but perhaps in Act Two, in the Pas de Deux in Act Two,
Yes.
how do you
Well,
feel anger or anything?
it's different because my partners are such nice guys, kind people. So I can't really, it's like, in the moment you feel it, if you're creating a role, but because I know them so well that I know they're not like that. But for sure, well, for Tatiana and Onegin, in the end, even though it's not necessarily like a happy outcome because they don't end up together, but I do think he realizes his flaws and his the mistakes he's made, and hopefully he's grown as a person. She's grown, of course, but I do think there's a positive in the end because even though it didn't, nothing happened the way we would have liked in theory, but he realized his mistakes and just moving forward in the future, hopefully he can be at peace with that. In Giselle, I don't know, I feel like he kind of just was, he just didn't do her very well, and I've never danced it, so I've never really been able to experience it on stage, so I should get back to you on that answer.
Yeah, I always think Albrecht thinks he can get away with it, so
Right.
he's
It's a
gonna
little
go.
bit mischievous about that.
But it'd be interesting to talk to you and see once you've done it how, or the sort of whole gamut of emotions that you will go through. But still, yes. So Jane also asks, what roles would you like to dance in the future? What's the next big thing that you really feel you would be ready to try?
So for class, like not pure, but like classical tutu ballets, my main dream role is Nikia and Baider. But for the foreseeable future, we're not sure what that looks like, because we don't do Baider anymore in the States. But it is such a beautiful ballet, and I never actually got to see ABT do it, which I'm very disappointed about. We did it a couple years like before the pandemic when I was in studio company, but I believe I was on tour or at home or something. I wasn't able to watch it. So I never actually got to see Natalia Makarova's version with ABT, but I've seen it on video. But I would absolutely love to dance that ballet because that's my dream role. And then for dramatic ballets, I don't know if I'm necessarily ready for it. I could surprise myself, but I could give myself a couple more years. But I would love to dance Menon because I think it's such a gorgeous ballet. The costumes, the music, the choreography, everything about it is so glamorous, and I would love to dance that hopefully in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure that must be on everybody's wish list.
I'm
really.
sure, yes, it
Yeah.
definitely is.
So one more question. Fiona is asking, she says, I was lucky to attend the galas earlier this year in Rome, where
Oh,
where
yeah.
you performed Don Q, Pas de deux with Aaron Bell, alongside very special dancers from elite companies. Do you find that intimidating, particularly when Kitri is a specialist role for a number of the ballerinas attending?
Yes. So it was a little bit intimidating at first, but again, a lot of the dancers I knew, so I was friends with, and I've, danced alongside or maybe danced with. But I felt very comfortable because I knew my partner was a strong, stable dancer and partner. So I felt very at ease, on stage. Of course, it was a little bit nerve-wracking to have people watching, especially all these elite ballerinas who are seasoned, who've danced all these things, for many years. But it was inspiring to be able to watch it as well, because I was in the first act. There's 2 acts. It was a very long program, but I was in the first half. So the second half, I was able to enjoy and, gain more inspiration by watching them from the wings or on the TV. But I just loved the experience. It wasn't my first time dancing in Italy, but my first time in Rome. And even just being able to experience the city and the culture that it brings it really helped my performance, I felt, because, I'm in a different environment, different place that I'm not familiar with, the language I don't speak. But I love dancing in Rome in that gala. So I hope to be invited back in the future.
I'm sure you will be. And I think that's the end of the questions. So I just want to say, I hope you're going to come back to the UK very, very soon and do some more performances. Yes, yes. Maybe we should have a word with Kevin O'Hare and see if we can invite you to the Royal Ballet.
That'd be nice.
It would be lovely to see you dancing again anyway. So fingers crossed that happens. And yes, everybody's basically saying they'd love to see you at the Royal Ballet.
Thank you so much. I love chatting with Deborah.
Well, I think we have to manifest this now and get you over here somehow. If you can fit it in with all your
Yes, I would love that.
I
would definitely be very nervous. I would be stressed for that, but it would be a very fun experience.
But they'd all be on your side,
Oh yes, no, I always feel that.
I mean, that's the thing. I think people really want you to do well, and that feeling does come across. I hope anyway. I'm going to hand back to Susan now, if that's okay. Susan, is she going to pop up?
I hope I popped up.
Great.
I'm here anyway. I'll start the video. There we go. There we go. I'm sorry. I was just so fascinated and listening. I wasn't paying attention to the screen to turn the video on. That was fabulous. Thank you both so much. Such a easy, casual conversation. You think you'd known each other for years rather than 2 minutes sort of thing. But no, it was great. Thank you. Your mom must have been just so thrilled when you were promoted on stage. That must have been a really special moment for both of you.
Yes.
Yes.
I had a lot of family in the audience as well, so that was really fun to have all of them involved.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute privilege and a joy to get to know you a little better and to hear about your journey to where you're at now. And you're so early in your principal career. There's just so much more to come, and we will be watching it with great interest and excitement. LBC members are mad keen on ballet, in case you hadn't realized that. And we go all over the world, as you've gathered, to see ballet. So you can expect a few of us in your New York audiences or wherever else you will be.
Let me know if you're in New York. Would love
That
to.
would be wonderful. But it's just been absolutely fantastic. And we will all be standing outside the Royal Opera House tomorrow morning with signs saying, "We want Chloe."
Oh, goodness.
Anyway, so thank you both so much. Deborah, thank you. You always come up with great questions and really get to the meat of it. And it's just been absolutely wonderful. So thank you both so much for giving
Thank
up part
you.
of your evening, your
No,
day for us.
anytime. I love chatting with you, Deborah. This
I
has
love
been so
chatting
fun.
with you. It's been a
I
real
didn't ramble too much.
Great. New friendships formed. So just to thank all of you for watching, and just a quick reminder, while I have your attention, April 4th, there's the rehearsal watch for Let's All Dance's newest production, which the Gainsbury Award has helped to fund. April 6th, Vanessa Fenton's having another one of her master classes with dancers from the Royal Ballet. And on April 14th at the Royal Ballet School and on Zoom, we've got Stephen McRae, principal with the Royal Ballet. And April 30th, as you know, is the day we go to the Royal Ballet School to watch classes for the day. It's sold out, but you can get on the waiting list. And finally, the 7th of May, we're having a Zoom conversation with Andrew McNichol of McNichol Ballet Collective, and Deborah will be interviewing Andrew on that one. So I hope you'll all join us for these things. And for, again, those of you who are joining us for the first time tonight, it's been lovely having you with us. I hope we'll see you again. So once again, thank you, Deborah, Chloe. It's been amazing, so much fun. And I hope we will see you soon somewhere. So thanks, everyone, and have a very good evening.
Thank you, Deborah.
Bye-bye. Bye.